made it. Oh, we're live, Scott. There you go.
Oh, we're live. Oh, woo, we're live. We're live. Well, good evening and welcome to our second episode in our new series for the Wednesday webcast on the alternative preparation course. Now, just before we go any further, let's just be very, very clear. This is not about bashing adoption or anything like that. We're very, 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 very much not doing that. I don't know what other words to use, to be honest with you. We're just looking at it from the back end of adoption. So, you know, a few years in, speaking to a few professionals over the next coming weeks. So, yeah.
Yes.
Just
and it's
very
not
clear.
Yeah, it's not a criticism of any adoption preparation courses that we may have been on or arranged in the past or future.
You know, do talk to us if you want to do that, because, you know, we'd be quite willing to contribute in some way, shape or form. You know.
Yes, we're available for weddings, bar mitzvahs and funerals. Exactly. We'll do anything for money, literally. Yeah. Today, I think the other thing to say is that we're working on the whole presumption that adoption is okay. And we all know that we have lots of questions. If anyone was on Twitter today, you will know that lots of people have lots of questions. We'll maybe get to that later. But with no
do we have to? Please.
No, we don't have to.
Cry today, to be honest.
It's our podcast. We can do what we want.
Do what we like. Yeah.
It's true. Anyway, without further ado, in our midst, we have a rather fantastic guest, Vicki McKeown. Hello, Vicki.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
I'm very welcome, because you're like one of those grown-ups in my life, aren't you?
If you ask me enough times, I will end up doing it. This shows that.
Yeah, I've known Vicki for a few years, but every time I say, I go, come on the podcast, and eventually you said yes. So I'm really pleased. So that's good. Vicki, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you wear many hats that brings you to the point of what's your connection with adoption and how did you get there?
Yeah, so I'm a therapist at an adoption therapy service in the Northeast. I'm also a qualified social worker, although I've never worked in statutory. I think that's important to say, but have a background in safeguarding and have worked doing the therapy side in adoption for the last 5 years now. So doing dyadic family therapy with parents and children and young people. You
also do the EMDR thing, don't you?
Yes. Yes, we use EMDR to process the trauma.
We're laughing because for the podcast I'm doing like the universal symbol for EMDR.
Yeah,
which is that?
Stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
I nearly got you there that time, didn't I? Got you on the rocks already early on. So we're talking about adoption today. So Vicki, tell me, we're thinking about how do we get people ready for adoption? How do we, you know, if we could go right back to day one before everything and all aspirations, tell us about your perspective and your experience of working with adoptive families and adopters.
Yeah, well, I think regularly in therapy, when talking to adopters, we have the conversation of sort of what they wish they'd known before adopting or before starting out on that journey. And I definitely think people need to be prepared for the fact that adoption isn't just a one-off event, it's a lifelong journey. And I know I mentioned on Twitter the other day that I think training needs to happen at every single stage of the process. And I think the initial training that I'm sure you'll have both been on, I think that's absolutely fantastic when it comes to preparing adopters for young children. I think we need more training throughout the adoption journey, but in teenage years and as other things come up later in life. What I found that I wish that adopters have told me that they wish they knew is how much work it was going to take, especially when you first get a child placed with you. It takes a lot of time, effort and energy, and you really have to funnel that attachment and spend a lot of time with your adoptive child. I think that's made particularly difficult if you've adopted siblings, because both need that disrupted attachment repaired, so you need to spend a lot of time with them. The feedback has been that actually it's not traditional parenting, so actually some people have found that their networks and family have really not supported their parenting style, and that's been really difficult and isolating. So I think my big bit of advice would be reach out for help, find your new network, as it were, find other adopters and other people that have been through similar experiences to you, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Lots of families that come to therapy, it's because they've reached crisis point. people can apply for the ASF straight away or very early on. Don't wait for crisis point. If you need that support, don't be afraid to ask.
Why do you think people, sorry, I'm going to butt in because you've literally ran through like 10,000 things already. So don't worry. Why do you think that people are not coming for help earlier? Is there sort of, do you see themes, or is it unique reasons?
I think a few things really is because you do have lots of training, don't you, before you adopt. So you think, well, I should know this, but actually it's very different when you've got a child living in your home and putting it into practice. So I think that's one thing in terms of people saying, oh God, I've forgotten everything I've learned. And so they daren't ask or sort of put their hands up and say, I need a bit of a refresher. I think the other thing is that often when children are first placed, there is the honeymoon period in terms of everybody's getting on, and it appears on the surface that the attachment's being made, but actually once the child is embedded in that family and feels safe and secure, that is when the trauma comes up and out, and that's when the difficult times start. And that's the time to ask for help rather than thinking, oh well, we were doing fine for the first couple of years, so why now? Maybe we were blindsided by the child and sort of their sense of safety within this family. I think absolutely, if the trauma comes up, reach out for help and process that trauma with your child.
Because you work, you're a therapist, you provide therapy to children. And do you see that, is it difficult to support families if they are at a position of trauma? What are the implications of coming at a position of trauma rather than coming when you've got worries or you just kind of think you need help?
Yeah, I think at the sort of crisis point, it's very difficult in the sense that everyone in that family unit is usually sat in secondary trauma. So the child's trauma's up and out, parents have got secondary trauma, they're exhausted emotionally and physically. So actually it's about putting in the sort of the work to make sure parents are okay, to support. So it's managing that whole family system, because everybody's burnt out from living with trauma because it's contagious and exhausting to live with. So as I say, the sort of initially it's reducing that overwhelm and then almost going back and then focusing on processing the early childhood trauma. Initially, it's just reducing the overwhelm and all the big feelings that everybody's experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Can I ask you, and not to draw you onto the rocks with this, but do you think there's stigma attached to all this in terms of, you know, we know that the majority of families only access these services when they're on their knees. And thinking back to 2007, when we adopted our older two sons, there was no discussion about ongoing kind of support and therapies and all that sort of stuff. Do you think there's still a stigma attached? Do you think parents feel under pressure to kind of be the perfect parent within all of this?
I think that's a difficult one, because I think in terms of the actual parent and family unit, I think they feel okay with accessing the support, but it's the people around them. So lots of, on my experiences, is that lots of people really struggle like at school, and that's often played down or not supported, and that then makes the parents question, oh well, the child's not presenting that like that at school, it must be just us and our parenting, because they present very differently at home. Again, my experience is largely if the support is known about in the local community and like people are talking about it, then people are more likely to access that support or go out and seek it. If it's not talked about, I know some of the families I've worked with have said, we didn't even know this existed. And we wish we'd had it sooner, sort of thing. So I think it's just people being aware that it's there, rather than, as I say, it been used at crisis point.
Yeah.
So going back to, I mean, this is our preparation course. So I guess one of the key messages then is expect to get help, as opposed to, I mean, are we saying that that is what we should say? It's almost a given. You will need help.
I think so. In some way, shape or form, I think you will need a little bit of help along the way, whether it's in terms of actual therapy or just regular training and refreshers. I don't think there's any harm in doing that and just keeping up to date. Things are always changing, and it's always good to have a refresher and just meet other people. So going on those training courses, you'll meet other adopters and just be able to share experiences. I know St James's Park, when you did that training, Scott, and Al, there was lots of people, or was it just Al that was there? There was lots of sort of people.
I wasn't invited, they wouldn't let me out that day. So
there was lots of people there just sharing experiences in the room and sort of good practice and what's worked, and those are really useful events. to have, and sort of, yeah.
So, I mean, I was thinking about imagining that conversation in an adoption preparation group saying, actually, we expect you to need support.
Yeah.
That's a difficult conversation, isn't it?
Difficult conversation, but an honest conversation, I would say, to have. And I do hope that that's happening more. I don't know, because I know on those sort of preparation courses, they do have adopters that go on, don't they, and talk. So I would hope that they would say, be prepared to ask for help, and sort of don't be embarrassed to do so.
I think that's a really interesting kind of point, because I mean, I've done it. I've gone to prep courses and talked. I've also heard of adopters who've gone and then not been invited back because they've been a bit too honest. And I guess there is a balance in it, isn't there? But I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, I wish I had known. You know, bear in mind that's a long time. Well, in adoption terms, it's a long time ago since we did it. But if I'd known, then it may have just made that little bit of difference to me, knowing that I would have been, you know, I could have, should have, and all that sort of stuff, been able to access those services, because, you know, then when you do go and access them, the children aren't quite au fait with you accessing those services. They think that, you know, again, a bit of a stigma attached, you know, oh, I have to go to play therapy, or I have to go to this, or, you know, not saying all children would come up with it, but, you know, the majority of children would, you know, say the class teacher, well, I've got to go to play therapy now. So that, I guess there is a balance to it. And I'm kind of questioning, knowing some of the agencies that we deal with, and some of the kind of social workers that we deal with as well, how we balance that kind of message without, I don't want to say putting people off, because we, you know, if people have gotten that far in the process, then they're obviously keen in some way, shape or form. But how do we word that? How do we get around that?
I think there's something about, though, even like whether sort of adopters come back after sort of 6 months of that child's been in placement, because even recently adopters have said to me, they did tell us about this, they did warn us about this, but actually the reality of living with it is very different. And that's the time when they could do with a bit of a refresher, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we were listening, but we didn't think it had happened to us, or we thought it'd be different for us. So I think there's something about coming back quite early, just to regroup and refresh.
So is it setting up that in preparation to say to people, actually, we're not necessarily asking you, but we will be checking in on you, even if you're telling us things are fine, that's fine. But the slightest hint, we need to be working on you.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say, my experience recently is with some post-adoption social workers. Some of them are absolutely fantastic and will just naturally regularly check in and pick up the phone and say, how are you getting on? How are things at home, school? And that makes a massive difference, because then the times when it isn't going well, those adopters feel able to say, well, actually, no, we're going through a tricky time at the moment, because they've already got that established relationship.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's quite a journey, though. I'm thinking about me coming as a prospective adopter. I can't have children, so I decided I want to adopt. I got my fostering hat on. Adopt. Different podcasts, different week. But then you're saying to me, you two are stood in the front, and, you know, we've got Vicki, social worker, we've got Scott, parent, and you're saying to me, you will always have social workers involved in your life, potentially. That's a big ask, isn't it? Because that's not what I signed up for, is it? Is it?
I think you'll always have them available, whether they'll be in your life, but I think having them available.
I can't believe you've done that on my Facebook page, because now that literally my Facebook comments section is going to explode. My social worker is not available. I tried to ring them 100,000 times. It's going to be smoke coming out the back. But when we say like 65% of families experience violence, you know, that at some point it's more are than aren't going to need help, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's sort of an issue that I come across in therapy, in terms of sort of the violence that comes up due to the trauma being triggered, and how we have to respond to that, support parents to manage it. And quite often it requires a sort of a safeguard and referral. Again, I think some social workers are absolutely fantastic at seeing that it is trauma that's been triggered, and come in and support people, support the families to manage that. But yeah, violence is definitely something that I see on a regular basis in the therapy room, which has been difficult through COVID, because usually we'd go in and help the child sort of lower the aggression through doing different sort of body moves, whether it's punching with pads or punching through newspaper or whatever, which obviously, as I say, has been made tricky through COVID. But it's about working with those feelings to help the child lower that feeling, and to help parents manage the behaviour in the home environment.
I know I'm doing a lot of talking, Scott, but I know that you're overwhelmed with having had a new haircut. You're just bathing in the glow of your newfound freedom.
Unlike these people who just shave their heads, some of us, don't we, Vicky? We have to actually make appointments and stuff, So, yes. I feel 5 stone lighter this evening, but thank you for mentioning that.
And you move faster through the house because of the less drag. I'm like,
no.
And one thing that I was thinking of was in relation to preparation of adopters and from a therapeutic perspective, how much of your work I know that the fund, like things like the Adoption Support Fund is set up for children, but I know you work outside of the fund and you work in all kinds of ways. How much of your work that you do is actually not supporting, but working with adoptive parents? And what sort of work are you doing?
Well, in private practice at the moment, I've got a few adult clients that are adopters that have come to see me because their own childhood trauma has been triggered by their child. And I've got some adoptive parents that are seeing me privately due to sort of the secondary trauma that they're experiencing. In terms of when they come to the adoption therapy service that I work with, they do sort of participate in an adult assessment before their child starts therapy. So that should bring things to light in terms of, does this parent perhaps need to go away and process some things themselves? It really highlights sort of what might be triggered for them in the room, because absolutely you need to know yourself, because your child will notice and pick out on every insecurity you possibly have. So you need to be prepared to manage that and be resilient enough to sort of see behind the behavior and see everything they throw at you, and when they're rejecting you, sort of see behind the behavior and where that stems from in terms of early childhood trauma.
Here's a thought. Do you think prospective adopters should have therapy?
I think everybody would benefit from therapy, but yes, I do think.
Yeah,
I know I would.
Yeah, and that's how you earn your living, right? That ends that answer, doesn't it? Yeah.
Sales pitch done.
Yeah, and Vicky's available at all major retailers.
No, I do think all adopters would benefit from some, just again, through the different sort of stages of therapy, because when we're actually into that sort of main trauma processing, it can be really difficult to witness your child going through that and reliving and remembering things that were really traumatic for them. That for the parent can be really traumatizing to witness. So actually the parents need that safe space to be able to go away and process what they're witnessing. And I mean, even recently a dad said to me about sort of the process, be prepared to feel uncomfortable. That would be the main message I'd give sort of prospective adopters. It can be an uncomfortable journey at some points in terms of the trauma that comes up, in terms of when sort of a child's regressing and they need you to go in and meet the early child's need, that baby part of them, sort of, so be prepared to feel uncomfortable. But even that is difficult for some people, isn't it? And they might need that separate space to go away and work through that. Well, that makes me feel really vulnerable or exposed. And that's something that they need to work through or be supported to work through.
Yeah, because I think that in terms of parents feeling or thinking they need therapy, I think they kind of relate that more to their potentially why they've come to adoption. So, if it's been because of their sorry, I just rattled my microphone. Oh, I can. He's on edge. Like I can see. He's just like, oh, but it's not. Normally that sort of thing is reserved in our heads for people who've not been able to have their own children. And I guess there's kind of this recurring thing about the foster carers as well. Foster carers get ongoing training. They get on.
Yeah.
And how could we apply that to adoption? Given there are a number of parents who want to just disappear when that adoption order is granted, they potentially will come back in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, But so
3 hours.
Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of questions about this. But how could we kind of just keep in touch? I know we've talked about adoption support workers, but how could we just kind of raise that kind of awareness of the fact that there is going to be that thing going on?
I think just having support groups. Again, last week I was talking to a social worker, and she was asking me, did I know of any sort of support groups, sort of coffee mornings that were happening in terms of, especially through COVID. She's found that adopters were really isolated, and actually they needed that space to talk to other people experiencing the same things. There doesn't seem to be that much sort of available in that sense, in terms of sort of just for adopters, in terms of, it's not necessarily training either, is it? It's just supporting each other, some sort of regular space and regular opportunity to meet up, to share their experiences. I do think there is probably a gap in that, and I don't know, obviously Twitter is used and some different Facebook groups, but again, I think sometimes it's better to be sat in a room and sort of talking to each other and sharing experiences.
I mean, there's a lot, there are options out there, of course, but it depends on the kind of geography as well, doesn't it? You know, how many, you know, if you're the only person in your whole county, I doubt that's possible, just using it as an example. But if you are the only person in your county, then the chance of a support group in your county is going to be fairly slim, aren't they? You know? Yeah.
And I do think those adopters that I work with that have sort of ended up linking up with other adopters or have met through different things, that looks and seems really beneficial for both parties, in terms of, especially if they're at different stages or they've got different age children, that can very much sort of share experiences and what was helpful or what support's out there, especially in terms of education, in terms of getting help around that. They seem to sort of know what's out there and can share those links with people.
Yeah.
There's I mean, there's a lot of people commenting, and I don't know whether you know any.
I hope they're nice comments.
No, they're evil, honestly. They're not.
No.
I can't read them when I'm talking, so that's my problem. I can't read them, so because I just don't. You know, it's like I'm typical bloke, really. Can't multitask at all.
But yeah, I mean, there's a few questions, people talking a bit about support and sort of acknowledging that peer support's been really helpful for them. Just, I think it just shortcuts all of those difficult conversations to go, yeah, my child's doing this and it's really tricky. But one question that someone came up, which was quite specific, is, do you think that it's in relation to behaviours, and it was when we were talking about violence, but other sorts of behaviours that are unusual or not within sort of normal parenting, kind of the normal parenting kind of spectrum? Do you think
Give
there's
me
any
an
value in
example.
telling?
What are you meaning?
Well, they've not given an example. Well, I guess we get sometimes sort of inappropriate reactions to strangers, that lack of stranger danger. Food hoarding, you know, those hoarding of food, which is kind of a bit of almost it's not a cliche, but you know what I mean, it's kind of it's used all the time. Do you think that we should be, how far deep should we go with preparation with adopters? Well,
I suppose
that
all comes, yes, but I would have thought that would come up in sort of initial training, in the sense that all behavior is communication, isn't it? So it's all communicating something, and it's about seeing behind that behavior and what need is it meeting. So in terms of stealing or hoarding food, it's meeting a need because actually I don't trust the people I live with to meet that need and feed me, so I'm going to have to store the food myself to meet the need. So it's very much seeing behind it. It might be going up to sort of different strangers and stuff because you want to feel safe and you want everybody to like you, especially when children are over familiar. It's almost like, I'm going to make everybody know that I'm here so that my needs are met and I'm not forgotten about. So yeah, I would hope that I'm not sure, but I'd hope that comes up in some way, shape or form in sort of the early training, in terms of seeing behind the behavior and how that behavior is communicating a need.
So that answers, that was Delhi on the tweet, on the Twitter. On
the Facebook, love. On the Facebook. Yeah. And Leanna, yes, Leanna made a comment there about Adoption UK, and of course that's what I'm saying. A lot of agencies, a lot of adoption support agencies, they're all trying to do these things online. I guess, and I'm so grateful that they have kind of converted onto that. But there is nothing better than being in that room with the person. And I'm doing an online course at the minute, and we had feedback sessions today, and I was like, I'm really struggling with this because there's not in the room, you know.
Yeah.
It kind of transfers over a number of different areas in our lives, doesn't it? And hopefully, you know, we're kind of coming out that other end now, and we can start to get back to some form of normality to be able to support each other, I guess, you know, whether that's through therapies and, you know, counseling and peer support, etc. So yeah, everybody's trying to do a sterling job. We do appreciate that, but we obviously can't mention every single adoption in the land, but we know they're trying their best.
Geography is a big part of that. I mean, I know in the northeast it's dead. Yeah. It's a wasteland for adoption spots.
I always used to say, like, I could stand outside I could stand at my front door. Next door neighbours have kids, the other side have kids, up the road have kids, etc., etc. But that experience for them is going to be different to me. If I want to find a family similar to my own, I may have to like look 10 miles that way to be able to, you know. So I'm not saying we're all in and out of our neighbours, but what I'm saying is, you know, at least if you're talking over the back fence to your neighbour and saying, oh yeah, my 15-year-old's doing that, and you know, maybe they've had a 15-year-old who's, you know, gone through the same things as a child who's, you know, living with birth parents. But to do that through adoption is really difficult, very difficult.
You need very specific neighbours.
You do.
Very specific neighbours.
That's why it takes a village to raise a child, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, as Helen Oakwater said, it takes a city to raise a traumatized child.
Yeah, that's
there you are. Thank you. It's true. That's what she says. Vicki, you were mentioning before as well, and this sort of links to preparation as well. And you mentioned that, I think at the beginning, this idea that we prepare for young children, not necessarily other ages of development or milestones. So what were you thinking there?
I just think there's something about what my recent experience has been in terms of people have sort of muddled through or sort of survived the early years, and it's when we get to the lovely teenage years that lots of other trauma surfaces, and how perhaps, my view anyway, is that adopters need to sort of come back and have more training around that. Because not only especially those that I see in therapy, they come into therapy to sort of work through their trauma and sort of repair the disrupted attachment at the same time as sort of the teenage brain kicking in, and they're naturally developmentally pulling away from parents. So I think parents need to know the strategies of how to manage that, because it is going to change and the risks change, and it's very different to manage, isn't it, to a young child, in terms of sort of you're encouraging your teenage child to have independence and go out into the big wide world, but they are probably going to show and exhibit more risky behaviors, and it's about how we support adopters to manage that. Otherwise we could be on the phone to the police a lot, or sort of parents are
what are you on about? What are you talking? You're talking rubbish, surely.
Where's the off button? This woman, this heresy.
So I do think it'd be really useful, as I say, to have more training available, and as I say, it to be optional, because not everybody's going to want it or need it, but for those that need it, I think it should be made available to people to come back. And especially those teenage years now, in terms of social media is such a huge thing, and I'm not going to go down the birth family sort of route, but social media in terms of being able to potentially contact birth families, I think that needs to be something that's talked about rather than shied away from, so that they don't go off and do it in secret and hide that they're making contact. I think where possible, in an age appropriate way, we need to be really honest and open with adopted children, so that they don't go out and sort of search for the truth because they feel it's been kept from them.
Yeah.
So I mean, in some ways you're suggesting, like at 8 years old you get all the adopters back and you go, or not 8, when the children are 8, and say we have a preparation for teenage years, 2-week course, and sort of flagging up themes and issues, because I think this I've found for my children, I don't know about you, Scott, but identity is really complicated about, you know, I remember being slightly confused myself as a child, a teenager again, going, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Where do I fit in? But all of those other questions about who the heck are my biological families, you know, and I could look at my dad and my mum and go, oh, that's clear where I came from. But that's just not available to our children. So it just adds another layer of complexity to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, even in terms of life story books, the quality of them vary massively, don't they? And so actually sometimes for some young people, reading their life story and having an understanding of that is enough for them, if it's a good quality life story book, where some it leaves more questions than answers, doesn't it? And so actually, well, I still don't know anything, so I'm going to go and seek out these birth parents to find out the answers. So I think the quality of life story books play a big part in how how much young people want to go out and sort of find things out for themselves in later years.
Definitely. And can I take us slightly off preparation groups now? And because there's a few people have wanted to talk about EMDR, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but a lot of EMDR, people are quite intrigued by it, and it's also there's people slightly it's sort of slightly mystified by it. What is actually going on? What is EMDR? What is it used for? And how can it benefit children who've been adopted and their parents?
EMDR is used to process trauma. So often when we're overwhelmed, we can dissociate and we very much switch off because the feeling becomes overwhelming. It's about helping process that feeling so it doesn't elicit the same overwhelming feeling when we recall a memory. So we've been able to work through it. It's a lot quicker than sort of talk therapy because I use Theratoppers. So you've got a buzzer in each hand. So it's very much keeping the cognitive and the emotional parts of your brain online at the same time, rather than being triggered and sat in your emotional brain or just sat and thinking very cognitively. It brings them both together. So especially for young children, often the memories are body memories, so they don't have any cognitive sort of memory of what's happened to them. So again, it helps their body process what's happened and process those big feelings that have come up. So it's all to do with bilateral, as I say, keeping the cognitive part of your brain and the emotional part of your brain online at the same time.
Yeah, you've kind of blinded us with science there, clearly. Yeah, Scott, you actually might have triggered Scott. I'm not sure.
As if I wasn't triggered already, but you know, whatever.
Scott's having a moment. Maybe can we have an intervention, public intervention?
It's something that I think probably a lot of us have heard of. I think that I've heard of it from a friend, shall we say. I'm not going to mention any names. And apparently, it was Al, actually.
What? The friend.
Yeah, my only friend. But what was interesting when I was listening was the levels or the potential, because we can't, I mean, everybody's different, the potential levels of success with that. But making the recipient understand that it's not just, how am I going to word this without offending you? It's not just some airy-fairy kind of idea, because like on first impression, that's how that.
Yeah.
No offense, but that's how it comes.
No, definitely. And I think unless you've tried it, it's really difficult to explain. And I think people are often very skeptical of it.
Yeah.
And it does just have a bigger shift in terms of processing things a lot quicker.
So is that to do with the kind of less talk thing?
Yeah. Because as I say, it's almost forcing you to sit with that feeling as well. Because often when we get an overwhelming feeling, we want to, right, I'll stop thinking about it, I'll shut that off, or I'll go very cognitive and just start talking about it. It brings it both together to actually process that memory. Yeah. It's almost sort of refiling it in your brain.
See, I'm glad I asked that question now, because now that actually makes a lot more sense than when Al explained it to me.
Yeah, I probably said, and then there's like, you do these things with your hands, and then you have these feelings, and it all goes away.
And that's obviously how they explained it to you, did they, Al?
Yeah, I think maybe that was electric shocks they were giving me. I'm not sure. That was something else.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Or was it a taser? I can't quite recall. Oh, that's really interesting. But it does sound like that it's something that, I mean, trauma is probably a recurring theme for a lot of children who've experienced, who are experiencing adopting. And you mentioned before this unfolding of adoption.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to draw you onto the rocks of what you think about adoption, but I'm not going to do that. So definitely not. What about, I'm not sure what else to ask you really, because I think you've covered an awful lot of things, and it's not like me to have lots of questions. Scott, have you got any specific questions you want to ask Vicki about therapy and preparation?
I was definitely more interested in EMDR. I guess in terms of thinking about why we're here, because we're here to talk about the preparation, and there may be people watching or listening after when it goes out as a podcast, thinking, okay, so this is not what I thought it would be, and I guess that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to kind of put them off and stuff. So you know, the therapy that and the stuff that you provide is obviously in one area. So how can we kind of influence? What can we do to? I don't want to use that word influence because we're not here to influence particularly, but how can we make sure that people are able to access this kind of stuff all over? You know, which is a hard question to answer, I know, but you know, what's your thoughts on that?
I do hope it is becoming more readily available, as I say, through the Adoption Support Fund and sort of local authorities having preferred providers. I do hope that there is a range of different sorts of therapies out there to meet the child's needs.
Yeah.
At whatever sort of stage they need them. And as I say, very much to meet the needs of some children do need sort of play therapy. Some children do need trauma processing. It'll massively vary depending on the need of the child. And I think it's important, and I know it is starting to be talked about a lot more now in terms of all children have experienced a loss. And I think often adopters, or what I've read and what people are saying, is in terms of we want to adopt a child as young as possible. All children, babies included, have experienced the trauma. Yeah. And I think sometimes adopters aren't necessarily prepared for the reality of what sort of that in utero trauma might have been and how that will present itself in years to come. And again, there might not be, not that there's not enough training on that, because even when I'm reading PARS, it does imply that social workers are sort of telling people like, your child might have experienced sort of alcohol, drugs, domestic violence when in utero.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's about what does that look like in terms of the child's behaviour as they get older. So again, I think it's just being prepared for every possibility. And as I say, don't be afraid to ask for help or just ask questions in terms of, oh, my child's presenting with this. Do I need a bit of support with it? Is this normal? How should I respond to it? How should I manage? Because again, some of the behaviours, a bit like you asked earlier, Al, in terms of that question, adopters can be worried about telling school or family members, oh, my child's doing this, especially if it's unusual behaviour. They don't want to tell others that it's happening. But again, it's sort of ending that stigma, isn't it? And asking for help and talking about it and really normalising that this is what happens and this is what adopted children can and often do go through.
Yeah.
Do you think people sometimes struggle because they perhaps do have a prospective adopter, or sorry, they have the child permanency report, and it sort of maybe does mention this stuff in passing in utero, but then part of them wants to say, yeah, but that was 5 years ago, and they haven't got a memory. So
yeah,
aren't you just being a wishy-washy liberal social work type? I mean, what sort of behaviours can you attribute that far on to that trauma?
Well, I was just thinking then in terms of sort of experiences that have happened in utero, even in terms of domestic violence, whether it's sort of a baby before they're born has heard a lot of shouting, you will see a young child sort of startle quite a lot in terms of when there's loud noises and stuff. So their body remembers in sort of terms of loud noises equals danger. In terms of sort of if there's been no sort of nurturing in utero, and I know that sounds odd, but in terms of sort of meeting that baby's needs, whether it be through antenatal classes, making sure that you're eating well, etc., you'll often see very early when a baby's held, they're not making any form of eye contact with that parent, they're just very much looking off into space. So already there is no attachment there, there's no connection in that relationship. So it can happen so early on, no matter how young that child is when they're removed from the birth parents.
But that's a difficult conversation in preparation group.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
because there's been lots in the media this week about siblings, and I know that the hashtag You Can Adopt kind of has leaning towards raising awareness of sibling groups. And I don't know about you, Scott, but I've seen often you have this, it's quite common to see an older child who's experienced a lot of adversity, and then a younger child who's come into care straight away, their siblings, and so parents will say, oh, well, we want it as young as possible. We'll take the, is that being too callous? I'll say it and then you can tell me.
I'm not sure that would happen quite like that these days, Al, of course.
No, but someone said, well, there's a 4-year-old and their 1-year-old sibling.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, we'll get a 1-year-old if we take the 4-year-old.
Yes, okay, I see. Sorry, I thought you meant
and that's
saying we only want the young one.
Well, I think people might do that as well.
They might.
Maybe my cynical black heart. But then they anticipate a level of need in the older child and kind of go, oh, but the younger one's fine. Does that create a dynamic when children have different behaviors in the home and similar story, but different manifestation and experience?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why in terms of adopting siblings, you need to be prepared for the level of work that you're going to need to put in. It's an absolute full-time job in terms of really putting in the time and effort with that attachment stuff. I know when families first come to therapy, a big chunk of the first sort of few weeks and months are focused on attachment and all the attachment games. And one mum said to me only recently, she didn't realise how important they were because she used to moan that I was getting her to do them every day. But actually, she could have been told in the preparation stages or early on before her children came to therapy, sort of 9, 10, that she could have spent years previously doing all of that attachment work and those attachment games, but she was sort of bringing up her children doing the traditional parenting that you would with sort of a biological child, not realizing that actually they really needed to funnel all this attachment and pull back all of the control.
That's interesting. That is interesting, because I'm now inclined to think, perhaps social workers doing the kind of training and preparation, whilst that's important, don't get me wrong, it is important, actually to have that kind of view from the sidelines and that support going through the process, even into the early days of placement. Yes, we all want to be parents, that's why we're here. But we also need to understand that this isn't a traditional kind of parenting scenario where we can just, either parent the way our parents did or not, depending on what way you swing. But to have that kind of support from the early stages, and at least until the adoption order goes through, and to see the kind of the support and advantage. I'll tell you, this is 2 weeks in the trot. I'm having good ideas. I need to stop this. I don't know what is going on. Write this one down out. Write this one down. Yeah, because to have that support, going through the process. I've said that 3 times now, but that would make such a massive impact to have that from day one.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's down to resources, though, not for lack of people wanting to do that. I'm assuming it's because of resources that are needed to do that.
I would hope so. But if any agencies are listening, or just make sure you put a little C next to it and then my name, and we're all good. Thank you.
Excellent. But that begs the question, and like all early intervention in adoptive homes is going to save money later on, isn't it? It's going to bear fruit in adolescence and adulthood and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, definitely needed all at every stage of the process. And I know you mentioned teenagers there briefly, Al, but I do think, I don't know what the statistics are, but I do think there's a lot more teenagers that are potentially going back into the care system. So I do think that needs some attention, and that it does worry me.
Well,
she's like human clickbait, this woman. She is literally like human clickbait, where that is just, there's been a massive Twitter fight today about numbers of children returning to care. So you're just trying to wind up our very kind listener.
But I agree, because I think that, had I had the opportunity, probably after having my children for a few years and knowing what we were going through, to then think about the teenage years. Now, we were very lucky, touch wood, we're going through it again with the third, but we were very lucky where the teenage years didn't really hit until about 15, 16. But I wish we'd had that kind of opportunity to kind of return to it and just, speak to even just other adopters who'd been through different kind of experiences. A lot of that comes down to peer support, I know. But, when it's kind of facilitated and what's available in terms of the support that you can access in terms of the ASF and, adoption support and stuff, I think that could make a really big impact when you've been in it for a few years. Because you're not thinking about the teenage years, you're not thinking about when they turn 18, and you're certainly not thinking about beyond 18 when you first adopt.
And I think an advantage of doing sort of training with parents is if your young person still doesn't want to access therapy or support, that's okay. It's equipping the parents to manage and support their young person through those years.
Yeah.
we had Peter Jacob on last year, who's sort of an NVR expert, for want of a better phrase, and he talked. I've done some NVR training, and one of the things they talked about support was finding therapeutic support, and they sort of saying that, yeah, don't just because you've got a sister mean that your sister's helpful. Don't presume that the people who are meant to support you actually get this. And it was about really developing with a practitioner support that's effective, having really difficult conversations and finding people who get it. And that just seems so important. I mean, I think I mentioned it last week. I've got a friend who's got in a similar circumstance to me with his kids, and every now and then he just messages me and he says, "Oh, this is crap." And I kind of go, "Yep." And it's like this shortcut conversation because he doesn't need to kind of go into and I'm not going to say, "Oh, just do this." If they were mine, put in some firm boundaries, and you go, "Yeah, he doesn't need that." It's not Scott, by the way. I do have another friend.
Yeah, he is more than one friend. Just saying.
That has been incredibly helpful, hasn't it, Scott?
Very. I'm so glad that we've kind of looked at it from this perspective, because I don't think that's an opportunity that we get when we're going through prep, and I think that is potentially it should be a key factor in it all, to be honest with you. We know who comes to prep courses: adoptees, potentially adoptive parents, birth parents, but just hearing it from this side and knowing that actually it's available, or it's potentially available, and we will need it, or we may need it, and being given permission to think like that.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, isn't it? It's giving people permission to know that, yes, right now you might just be thinking, I just want to be a parent, but actually in 6 months, a year, 2 years, we're giving you permission to know that you can come back.
Yeah. And I think it's
policy.
Touching base with your sort of adoption agency, isn't it, or local authority, whoever, and finding out, because applying for the adoption support fund, that isn't necessarily a quick process. So it's doing it before, as I say, you reach crisis, because then even in that crisis point, it still might take a couple of weeks or months before you actually get the support you need.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that. Completely. But of course, we need to know when our crisis point is, which can sometimes be a little bit tricky as well.
Yeah, it was March.
This is right now. Tonight.
March 2008. Vicki, there's been loads and loads of comments on our Facebook page. Could you, I know you're on Facebook and you've kind of followed us, so could you go on there and answer any questions and stuff? That'd be really good. Yeah. Can you tell people where they can get a hold of you? Because I know you've got different, you are the queen of memes. If you follow Vicki, I don't know how you find time to write. I don't know where you get them from. Where do you get all your memes from?
Just on the internet and different adoption things, or anywhere really. But yeah, all my different social media things are BLM Therapy, and my website is blmtherapy.co.uk.
And you're on Insta. What you on is on Insta?
Everything's BLM Therapy.
Oh,
see, that was thought through, wasn't
it? Very simple and consistent.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why she gets the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly. Digital marketing gone really well there.
Yeah, it's true. So Vicki, thank you so much. Stay on the line, because we'll talk to you after this, and everyone usually
bitch about everybody after this.
What? You can't say that on the I'll have to put an explicit warning on, because you've used the B word.
Oh, get a life. We've used worse and not had to put an E on.
Well, I'll bleep it out anyway. Anyway, sorry, Vicki, I apologise for Scott's vulgar and coarse language. You being a lady. Sometimes I feel my social work registration just fade away.
Yeah, but before we go, Al, can we just tell everybody episode 3? What's episode 3? Next Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Who have we got? What are we doing? Who are we discussing? What are we discussing?
We have got, for the first time ever, I think, a practicing adoption social worker. Not a manager, not a head of a service, actual foot soldier on the front lines of social work. I
love that. A foot soldier. That sounds,
yeah. And he's going to come on. He's going to talk about his we'll see if we can help him keep his registration through the process of
bless him. He doesn't know what he signed up to, does he?
Yeah. And he's going to talk, and so people come on and ask questions and sort of what he's thinking about when he's doing preparation, and kind of let him unpick some of the challenges that social workers face, and maybe things that they'd like to say but don't say. Well, who knows?
And like we said earlier, it's not about picking holes in adoption. It's just, this will be his view on how his experience over the years, and hopefully it'll give a little bit of an insight into the kind of the social worker experience in all this.
Absolutely. So Vicki, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful, patient, kind guest.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
And look after yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We will see everybody next week. Same place, 8 o'clock, Wednesday. Boom.